Welcome back to pointkarting.com and our YouTube channel, and we're back with our DR Mini 18 chassis build series, and today we're going to install the support system for the front Nassau panel as well as the panel itself. The front Nassau panel and support system is primarily composed of about 4 components. Obviously you have the Nassau panel itself, which is made of plastic and has fitted rubber grommets in it. This is the KG MK14 version. As you can see, this one is black standard and is a injection molded plastic, and then the rubber grommets are fitted afterwards. Before we can install that, however, we also need to support it with the support bracketry. This goes on the very front and has a height adjustable component to it. And then you have the 2 side brackets, which will fit off of the steering shaft support and fit much like this. Before we can install the fairing, we need to make sure that we put the supporting components on there correctly. And the first step is going to be to almost backtrack just ever so slightly from a previous video, and we're going to need to loosen up our steering shaft support column. To do that, we'll need a 5mm and a 10mm wrench, and we'll need to put those on and loosen this up just temporarily. So as you loosen the bolt, go ahead and support the steering shaft, pull it out, and then we want to find these small steel washers, and we want to place those on the inside edge of the fairing support, the top components, and we'll slip that back, making sure to put the steering shaft and steering shaft support back in the same position. We'll push that through. Then we repeat that process, again making sure that the short side relative to the bend, from the distance from the hole to the bend, is positioned on the bottom. And we push that on. We take our larger washer and we put that in between the fairing support. And then we have our screw and our washer and nut, and we thread that on. And we don't need to go super tight with this bolt, but we do need to get it fairly tight as we retighten it. So again, grab my 5mm Allen and my 10mm wrench, and I'll begin to tighten this assembly. As we begin to tighten this, be careful of your fuel line fittings. Make sure that you don't tighten it around that. Bring them up and over those to make sure that you're not putting any strain on the tank or the fuel cap or anything like that. And then go ahead and crank it down. At this point, we can make sure to reinstall our safety clip on our main steering shaft bolt. And as we've shown in previous videos, might be a good idea to have a little needle nose pliers to reinstall that. So reach down and reinstall that safety clip. Once we've installed those, now we can see the upright support system for our fairing. That, of course, is roughly how that's going to fit over those supports. And then it's a matter of putting the bottom support in place. Now we can see there's 2 components here that fit together via these adjustment bolts, and it's very important that we put it on here correctly. So visually inspect it and find basically the angle that's going to make sense, which is the more gradual radius. There's a 90-degree bend and the more gradual radius, and the gradual radius, which is maybe more about 120 degrees, is the one that we want to install actually on the frame. So have that facing basically outwards or inclined outward towards the front of the chassis. Find your M5 bolt with the conical supporting washer. Slip that through the chassis tab. Find your nylock nut and washer on the other side. Slip those on. Take your time with this one, as the positioning is a little bit awkward. And unlike the other main bolt, this is actually a 4mm Allen that you'll need, as well as that 10mm wrench on the back side. My recommendation is hold the Allen in place and tighten just the nylock nut on the back side until it's mostly tight. Then position this roughly right in position, and go ahead and tighten down like so. Okay, so now I've got my supporting bracketry in place, and the last thing that I need to do is actually put these rubber grommet supports in place. And these fit on the outer face of each of these supporting brackets. And they have corresponding nylock nuts that go with them. There actually is a 10mm bolt and make it so that on the very top of them as well as on the bottom. And one quick trick that you can also do is you can utilize the cotter pin to hold against if you really want to. And as you bring it in, hold that cotter pin in place roughly where you'd want to put it once the fairing's on there, and tighten down. Then repeat that similar step for the other two, like so. One little tip is try and get the cotter pin pointed away from the legs of the driver, so as they get in, they don't run the risk of hitting it or stabbing their leg on it. Especially with the kids, they're not a very big fan of that. And this is a cadet kart, so we want to be mindful of that. And there we go. Okay, now my support bracketry is almost completely installed, and now it's time to install the fairing. These rubber grommets fit over these grommet supports. It's important that you support the grommet as you push it on, otherwise it'll try to work loose out of the plastic. So basically put your thumb over it and push, and sometimes if this is not brand new, you may have to work it side to side, but on this chassis they're fitting really nicely. And then just push it into place. Okay, so this was basically the fit up section of my fairing install, but as you can see, it doesn't really look like it's sitting quite right on the chassis. So one thing I may need to do is pull it back just a little bit. That looks a little bit more like how it's supposed to look. It's kind of the top of it's even with the steering wheel, so that part's good. But then I see I have a gap here at the very bottom, and that's where this adjustment on this bottom fairing support comes into play. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen these just ever so much, and then I can push down with those adjusters and retighten. And over time, depending on where you want it and depending on the driver requirements, if they can't quite seat over that, you can make all sorts of adjustments to this, which makes this whole system really nice to use and really easy to work with. But that, in a nutshell, once you put the safety clips in across the front and the sides, is how to install the front Nassau panel on the DR Mini 18. So that's it for this build segment of our DR Mini 18 chassis build, where we installed the front fairing supports and the front fairing itself. Stay tuned and head on over to pointkarting.com for all the components you see here and more, and we'll be back with more tips and tricks soon.